Welcome to the ML Dropout. Today we're going to backtest a simple moving average crossover strategy using Pandas. For those of you that don't know, Pandas is a Python package that's commonly used to do data analysis, data wrangling, and all kinds of other tasks that are typically conducted when you're working with data for modeling purposes, for cleaning purposes, for whatever. So today what we're going to do is we're going to use Pandas to show us how can we backtest a very simple high-level trading strategy. So getting into this video, there's a few things that we need to note. So here are packages I'm importing. So operating system, some things for like how to interact with the Jupyter Notebook, Numpy, which I'm importing as MP, Pandas, Plotly Express, which we're going to use for visualizers. I'm setting my path to a directory I have where I have my own backtesting engine. Reason for doing that is that's where I keep my data. And then we're just going to get into some of these versions of these packages. So we just ran that. So now let's just look at the versions of packages I'm using just in case you try to replicate this. So I have Python 3.9.12, and this specific kernel or this specific Python environment, my Pandas version is 1.4.2. Pandas 2.0 is out now. Most of this should work in Pandas 2.0. Will there be something you have to change? I doubt it, but I just want to call it out that it's not the same. And then we have NumPy version 1.2.5. So now we've talked about what is it that we want to do, and we've talked about what are our Python packages and versions. So now let's go open up TradingView, and we're going to look at this strategy implemented on a candlestick chart so that we can visualize what it is that we are actually trying to do here. So here we have my TradingView chart. In this TradingView chart, we're looking at the Australian dollar to the US dollar, and we have our M&A cross indicator here. So I'm just going to open up the settings on this so you can see what we're doing. So in the M&A cross, we have a short moving average length of 36. We have a long moving average length of 144. I'm using 10-minute candlesticks, which means the short moving average is going to be 360 minutes or 6 hours. And then the long moving average is going to be 1,440 minutes or 24 hours. Now, getting into how I chose to color the short moving average versus the long moving average, I did it using, our wavelength spectrum. So if you think about light and how short wavelength light tends to be more of like a violet blue, and how long wavelength light tends to be more of an orange red, that's how I did the moving average. So when we look at the chart and you see the violet is actually going to be your short-term moving average. And when you see the orange is going to be your long-term moving average. So what exactly is it that we're trying to do with this 6-hour and 24-hour moving average? Well, essentially what we want to do is say whenever the moving average crosses, so whenever your short moving average goes above your long moving average, or whenever it goes below your long moving average, we're going to take a trade. And in this specific strategy, I'm going to say that I'm always going to have a trade open, right? And so when we do this backtest, we're initially going to say that when the short one passes the long one, right? So when the price of the short, the value of the short is higher than the value of the long, we're going to go long in our position. When the short falls below the long, we're going to go short in our position. And we're always going to have a position open. We're always going to be trading one side of the coin, depending on where this moving average is. Now, if you see here, we see this green plus sign. This indicates where there was a crossover. So this was essentially be where we are both closing and opening a trade. So if you were to see here on the style of going long when the short is above the long, then we would be up, a good amount of pips right now. I'm looking at that. That's about 45, 50 pips that we would be up right now. And if you look here, like this would have been a flat trade. This right here would have been a losing money trade, but like very small. This right here would have been a short, and we would have made a little bit of money there. So that's kind of what we're looking at, right? And the idea here is, since we're using a 6-hour to 24-hour moving average, right, for this crossover, we're going to be taking trades semi-frequently. And when I say semi-frequently, you might be taking one a day, two a day, one every other day. It just depends on how much the market is trending, right? So if you see all these plus signs, we're taking a lot of trades. So we're back here in our Jupyter notebook, and now we're going to run the imports to import my trading engine. The main reason why I do this is because inside of my trading engine, I have a function to load the data for me, prep the data. There's a little bit of like a time shift that I need to do. There's a little bit of like cleaning that I have to do to it as well. But so I'm going to load the engine. With the engine, we're going to load the data. So whenever you see me hovering these different cells, typically what I'm doing is hitting Shift Enter. So Shift Enter, Shift Enter, Shift Enter. Data just loaded. So let's look at the data. So the way I have my data formatted is I use a multi-index Pandas data frame. And what that essentially means is that I have two column levels to this tabular data. So first, if we look at the top column or the top row, you're going to see time, year, month, instrument, bid, ask, volume. If you look at the second row, you're going to see OHLC, and you're going to see that repeat again for the ask. So essentially what this means is that at any given point in time, I have the numerical year, the numerical month, what instrument was traded, and then I also have all of the bid, open, high, low, close data, and all of the ask, open, high, low, close data, as well as the volume as provided by my broker. So now, where did I get this data? I actually got this data from AUDUSD. AUDUSD is my current Forex broker. You can easily get this data by opening an account with them and then by using their API. And if anyone's interested in me making a video on that, I can definitely do that. Just drop some comments below and I'll find some time to do it. So now let's get into setting up the initial framework for the backtest we're going to do. So first, I'm going to take the data that I loaded from my engine and we're going to make a copy of it. Making a copy means that whenever I make a change to the data frame, it won't change the original data. This can be useful if I want to go back and reuse the original data, as if I were to use it right now and make changes to it, it would change the original data. So we're just making a copy just in case I ever want to reference it again and I don't want to have to go through the process of reloading my data. So we make a copy of the data. So we'll run that right now. And then we're going to create two different columns in our data set. So first, we're going to make a short moving average. And so the way I access my multi-index data frame to do this is I list whatever the first column name is in like the first row of my columns in the first index, and then the name of the second column in the second index. So ask, close, we're going to do rolling 360. So my data is 1 minute data, if you notice. Sometimes you might see a gap here. That's just because like at that time, that's when the market technically closes and reopens. So there is sometimes a gap at 1600, just because Central Time US, that is when the Forex market tends to close. So getting into this, rolling 360, so that's going to be our 6-hour window. That's our short moving average. We're going to do the same thing for our long moving average. And then what we're going to do is we're going to filter the data frame. So this third line here, what it does is it says anywhere where the long moving average is false, we're going to filter that out, meaning that it's going to remove the first, 1,439 rows of data, simply because we don't have the data to support having two moving averages at that time. And then we're going to reset our index and drop it. So let's just run that real quick. And I'm going to press Escape A so that I can create this new cell. And I'll just show you what this looks like now. So now you can see our data. We have this short moving average, this long moving average, and everything's based upon the close of the ask, right? We're just doing this very simple. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this. So now that we have the moving average set up, we're going to start looking at how to do a backtest. And when we look at how to do a backtest, there's a lot of things that we need to try to account for. And so at a very high level, the things that we're going to try to account for are going to be things like a trade indicator. So this is going to tell us if we're going long, if we're going short, maybe we're not taking a trade. And then on the trade indicator, then we have a trade iterator. So this is basically just going to indicate in a binary fashion. It's more like a trade flag if a trade was taken, right? So the trade indicator is going to say long, short. The trade iterator is going to be like 1, 0. And then with that, we're going to then have like a trade ID. So you need to be able to track trades so that you can then kind of get context on how individual trades perform in this backtest. Then we're going to add another one for, let's say, position or the direction of the trade. And this is essentially going to tell us, are we long or short? So in one case, we say we go long. Then we need something else that says we're still long, we're still long, we're still long, we're still long. And then from there, we get into like calculating your unrealized P&L, calculating your realized P&L, and then we'll even get into like how do we add trade duration, right? Because trade duration is going to be different than like your trade ID. So first things first, I have this variable, which is how, and this just says, how is this M&A crossover going to work? I have it set to normal. Now, what this means is, we'll just scroll down real fast. We can do normal, which is that when the short goes above the long, then we trade long, and when the short goes below the long, we trade short. We can also do inverse, which means if the short goes above the long, we're actually going to short because we think that the short is going to have a tendency to return to the long, right? Um, which one is better? Who knows? We're going to find out. But I like having the setting to have that there. And then since I have this in a Jupyter notebook, I can just reset, run it all, depending on how I change that setting, right? So we're going to hit Shift Enter. We're going to run that. And now we're going to just go on about our business. So we just calculated our trade, trade editor, trade ID, and our position. So I'll just show that real fast. So now you can see all of these columns. So we see like we're not taking trades here. So there's no trade indicator. Then you have your trade ID. So we see that in the normal M&A crossover over this 3-year period, it's roughly like 3 years and 3 months, right? So 2021 to April of 2024, we took over 990 trades, and then we're seeing what those trades are. So like, right here you might see it says short. We technically do start in a trade here. We have the trade ID. It just, the logic here is not going to show you into the first trade. You're just like assumed to already be in it, but whatever, we'll move on. So let's get rid of this. And now we'll go into, we don't really technically need that. This just shows exactly what we saw. So now we're going to start calculating our unrealized P&L. So if any of you are familiar with Forex or trading stocks or anything like that, you know that there's something called spread. So spread is going to be this difference between the bid and the ask that usually brokers or market makers will kind of make tiny profits off of. So here we're going to have a spread of 1.6 pips, which, when we look at this value, it's important to explain what a pip is. So a pip is like 1,000th of a penny, or a 10,000th of a penny, I'm sorry. So if you think about it, like 1 penny, yeah, it's 1,000th of a penny. 1 penny is 100 pips. 10 pennies is 1,000 pips. 100 pennies is 10,000 pips. And then when we get into like what is 1/100th of a penny, that is going to be 1 pip, right? So like this is technically like 1.6 hundredths of a penny, but Forex says margin, and I won't get into that. I'm just going to assume you have some context there. So we have the spread. So we're saying we're going to always have the spread. When we initialize a trade, it's always going to have this negative spread. So I have these Numpy where statements that I use to calculate, are we entering a trade? If so, minus the spread. If not, get the P&L, and this is just like an iter. So I'm just going to show you how this works. It's a lot easier to show you with the data frame. So we have this unrealized P&L iter. So it shows us starting out at 0, right? Because there's nothing. So then on minute 2, right? So this is like minute 1, or technically I guess minute 0. On the next minute, we see this negative, it's like 0.2 pips, like 0.2 pips. And this comes from the difference here between the close, right? So we see that the close goes down, up by 2, and we're short. So we have this negative 0.2. And then your unrealized P&L is now growing. And now what this unrealized P&L iter does is it's going to calculate, again, just the difference between this one and this one, right? So we see another difference is going to be like 1.2 pips, or like 0.00012. And now we're seeing that this is like the cumulative sum over here on the unrealized P&L side. So this is the one-step iteration of unrealized P&L, and this is just keeping a sum of like all of it together. Both of these are kind of important. This makes the backtesting easy. So explaining that, let's go on. Now we're going to do realized P&L. So realized P&L is kind of going to leverage that unrealized P&L. Let's just show the data frame. And so now we can see like, okay, it's 0, 0, 0, 0. And then at the end, we can see, oh my gosh, it's negative 25, or yeah, 25.9 cents, which is like 26,000 pips. Not 26,000, 2,600. I'm so sorry. 2,600 pips, which is crazy. That's a lot of money lost. Like that blows up people's accounts. But we'll get rid of that. We'll just keep on going. So we have everything we need to be able to calculate, are we in a trade? What's the unrealized gain or loss of the trade? What is the realized gain or loss of the trade? Now we're just going to add a trade duration. and we're going to look at it again. So this is just showing us, okay, this is going to be the duration iter, and then over here we have the trade duration, and it's showing us how long we've been in the trade in terms of like minutes. Great, let's move on. What is this going to show us? So this is going to look for where trade ID equals 2, and we're just getting like the index of where it first equals 2, and then we're looking at the 5 rows before it and the 5 rows after it, so we can kind of see, okay, in this data frame, when I'm exiting one trade and looking into another trade, what's going on. This is kind of a way to validate, is the data doing what it's supposed to be doing? Like, is the math being calculated correctly? So here we see we're in trade ID 1, we're short, then we get this message go long here. So now we have this trade indicator. Now trade ID is 2, we're long. P&L starts at this negative 1.6 pips, right, for our spread, because we just entered the trade. We also have over here the trade duration resets. There's a few columns that are getting cut off because there's too many, but essentially we see things like the unrealized P&L now is stored as realized P&L, and we just keep on going. So now your realized P&L is tracking, so we know that we've lost, what is basically 50 pips, and now we're in a long position, right? Kind of just validating that, yes, this is doing what we think it should be doing. This is actually doing like a valid back test. It's not the most like detailed back test, and when I say that, I mean it doesn't have the like highest level of precision or accuracy. You don't have the ability to say like, hey, this is my stop loss, this is my take profit, blah, blah, blah. But if you're trying to say like, hey, I have this idea uses indicators or something that I can easily calculate, taking a framework like this, you can calculate or run a back test on that strategy in less than an hour for multiple years of data and just say, does this look like a good idea? Now, from what we saw from saying that it was negative 2,600 pips, maybe your inclination would be like, no, that's a bad idea. But then you can always inverse it, right? You can always say, okay, take the opposite side of the trade. How does that work out? So real quick, we'll move on. We'll come back to that in a second, taking the opposite side of the trade. So we're going to plot the realized P&L, so the realized profit and loss. So right here, we're just going to round the numbers so that we get clean numbers when we plot it. I'm going to create this profits data frame that basically just looks for where we have go inside of our trade. So if you notice, we have like go long, go short. So I'm just saying, where are we actually opening a trade? And then we're just going to look at how the profits change when we open trades. So boom. So again, it says 990, it's technically 991. But here we go. Let's get into the figure. Let's see the chart. So here's the strategy, right? So over time, we can hover over it. We can see, okay, what is the time? What is the realized P&L? What is the realized P&L iter? That's going to be basically your profit for the trade that just closed. The trade ID, trade duration, actually, I should have this shift one, but we'll move on. That's going to bug me, but that's fine. And then we can zoom in here and kind of get an idea of like, okay, if I look at this, I can see that like this trade, which technically would have been trade ID 2. So both of these are one too far. But trade ID 2 would have been like for 65 pips, which is great, right? So we can come in here and get like a high level detailed look on like some of the individual trades. But then let's say like, hey, I actually want to look at like how an individual trade performs during the backtest. I don't just want to see the results of it. Then we can come in here, and this is where we're going to really use that trade duration. So I'm going to create a different data frame now. I'm going to call it zoom. And we're just going to zoom into like the first 5 trades. And this should be connected technically. And the reason why the trade duration matters is we're going to use that as our x-axis. And so now if you look at this, you can see that all of our trades start over here on the left. If I were to use time instead of x, this is what our chart would look like. You'd see all these random trades just pop up over time. In some ways it's easy to digest, in other ways it's hard because they're not starting at 0. So some people, they might say that this is easier to digest. Props to you, props to them. For me personally, I like to see all the trades kind of overlaid on top of each other. I feel like for me personally, it just helps me get better insight. So we're just going to go back here and we're going to trade it back to duration, plot again. And then now what we're going to do is we're just going to, kind of zoom in. But real quick, I think it's important to call out. So at the top, we see like 1 penny. So again, 1 penny is 100 pips. On the bottom, we see a fourth of a penny, so that's negative 40 pips. So our trades are kind of trading in a good range, right? Like you definitely want your winners to ideally be exceeding, 50 pips. Unfortunately, you do not want your losers to be going to 50 pips, but this can kind of give you some context into, hey, if I were to maybe implement this strategy in a more like high fidelity environment where you have more precision, more accuracy, what are the things that I would want to change? Maybe I'd come over here and I'd hover over this and I'd say, okay, this particular trade got into like 102 pips profit. Maybe I have a good understanding that in Forex, the markets typically don't tend to make 200 pip swings without having a reversal. So maybe I can say, okay, if a trade makes 90 pips or 95 pips, I'm comfortable taking profit there because I think the likelihood of reversal increases. And so in that case, like I might set that as a take profit level in a strategy that I implement in a higher fidelity system. But here we're just trying to get a high level, throw a dart at a board. Does this look good? Is it worth me going and spending 40 hours to code this or to manually backtest or improve things? I was just sitting in the shower. I had this idea. Let's waste an hour, go make it. Is it worth me investing my time here? That's what we're doing here. So anyways, we can come in and kind of zoom in here, see how the trade performs over time. We're using our unrealized P&L here. With our trade duration, you can kind of see it move. And if you wanted to, you could technically like pull up, as many trades in here as you wanted, right? Like we could technically look at 10 trades, 12 trades. I don't recommend going above like 10 or 12 because then they might not plot correctly. It's just a lot of data for your computer to handle. Um, and honestly, it's going to be a lot for your eyes to handle as well. But you can kind of come in here and look at the different trades, see how long they're trading, right? Maybe duration is something you want to optimize on. Um, but yeah, universe is yours here. So we'll go back to 5. And now we're going to go into the inverse. All right, so we were looking at um, if we traded the like momentum is what we'll call it, right? When the short goes above the long, we're saying the momentum's to the upside, we're going to take that trade. So, again, looking at, let's just go to the full data frame here. In the full data frame, we see that we had a total realized P&L of basically negative 26 cents, which is negative 2,600 pips. That's not really ideal. So what does that look like if we flip it? If we say, you know what, if the short-term moving average goes above the long-term moving average, we're actually going to take a short instead of going long, right? What happens if we do that? So we'll close this. We'll just come back up here. I'm going to change this to inverse. We'll just go through these fast. And Python's quick. Like it calculates this backtest super fast, right? So we'll just come here. We're already here at the point of looking at our data. So we'll just look at it as a plot, actually. I won't give a spoiler. So now we have a plot, and this is the inverse. And the inverse is showing us the profit over time. So now here we see that the realized P&L, it's negative 5 cents, right? So it's like negative 5.6 cents. So here we are, negative 600 pips, something like that. And we can look at the data frame just to validate. Here we are, negative 560 pips. But if you think about this, right, we have a spread, and our spread is, again, negative 1.6 pips. And if you multiply that by 990 trades, you're basically losing 1,550 pips because you're placing so many trades, right? So obviously what you want to see first as like a sign of confidence is something that is losing less than negative 1,500 pips, because that means that what you're losing money to isn't necessarily a bad strategy. It's that the spread is killing your strategy, right? Maybe you're trading too frequently. And so a way to fix this could be that we go and we change the duration of the M&As. Maybe we try to make this like a swing trade strategy, right? Trade less often, go for bigger swings, whatever. Maybe to implement some like stop loss, take profit targets. But the fact that this is, less than negative 600 pips and that we're paying, almost, 1,500 pips into spreads for these trades shows that there is actually more potential in reversing the M&A crossover than there is trading into the momentum. So we'll close that, come back down, look at it again. So kind of interesting, right? We see initially we're kind of dipping down, we get into some big profit. This is kind of promising here. It's not like amazing, right? Because we see some of these trades like we should have been on the other side of. And maybe you can add economic data here to make it better. What's concerning though would be this right here, right? Like you see a huge drop and you see it's like negative 12 cents, right? So that's 1,200 pips that we just like consistently lost and lost and lost and lost. That's not something we really want to see, right? So I think the one thing here is like if we were to say, hey, I want to trade this strategy, maybe the first thing that I would want to start with is like, hey, I'm going to go in and add stop losses. So let's come here and, you know, we can maybe look at a few of these trades and see what that would have looked like if we had stop losses. So we're going to filter this twice. $320 and less than $330. Might throw a fit. Yeah, sometimes it does that. So we're just going to cast these as ints. Add the other one. And this is like a trick that I use a lot in Pandas. Sometimes it those fits when you do like conditional logic. So I'm just going to say casting each of these conditions as integer and adding them and saying it has to equal 2. So what this does, let me make sure that this is parentheses are correct. Okay. So what this does is it's going to say if it's greater than 320, that is going to be Boolean flag of 1. We're saying it's an integer, right? So now it's not going to be true false, it's actually going to be 1. Then we're going to say if it's less than 330, instead of being true false, if it's true, it's going to be 1. So we're saying when this is true and this is true, adding them together should equal 2, and that's the condition we want to see. So it just worked. Now let's run this, and now we can kind of see between 320 and 330, which are going to be kind of the earlier trades in this range. What would happen maybe if we add some of these stop losses, right? So we have a few positive trades. We have some trades that lose, well over 100 pips, right? So obviously, if we add something to account for the downside, if we have a stop loss, maybe we have a stop loss like 30 pips, we would not take or not lose what we lost on all these trades. And potentially we would actually see the strategy play out a lot better because imagine, if instead of dropping 1,200 pips right here, we only drop 200 pips right here. So that'd be like 1,000 more pips you have. And so if you add 1,000 pips like your negative, 0.06, you'd be at a positive 0.04, right? So again, this just gives you direction. With that direction, then you need to identify, okay, where do I want to add precision? And that's where like coming in and zooming in on the individual trades is helpful. And that's why I love Python, because I can do this at scale so easy. I don't have to go into TradingView. I don't have to manually go through and backtest, right? Like, let's just go to TradingView real quick. So here we are in TradingView. So a lot of you know that like sometimes when you're doing these manual back tests in TradingView, what you'll do is you'll come over here, you'll go like long position, and then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to enter my trade, whatever right here is. So we'll just say at the start of the minute, and I'm going to project whatever my stop loss is, my take profit. We'll go over this duration, but we're going to say like there's 3 conditions that need to be met, or in this case maybe 1 condition, but there's conditions that need to be met for me to enter this trade. And then you're going to go through and basically maybe take a screenshot of this. You're going to save it on your computer, put it into like Microsoft Word. You're going to add comments about what was good about this, what was bad about this. You're going to do it 500 times. If you pay for a premium, TradingView subscription so you can have more data, which I do, I can go back for a really long time if it decides to load. But it's just not a good use of anyone's time. And so again, this is why I love Python. So I hope you love the video. If you're interested in watching, or if you're interested in me showing you how to get like the Forex data from Wanda from their API, just again, leave a comment. And if enough people want it, then I'll spend time and make a video for that. Thanks.